program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Discretion is advised.
Alrighty there, ladies and gentlemen. Your nighttime, right time DJ Music. Welcome to another episode of the Chop Shop. Keeping it real there, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stop that from coming across the screen over there. I'm getting straight to it. You know, I'm not one of those guys who pat myself on the back. But way back in 2015, I said if Donald Trump was going to be elected president, at that point in time, no one really, some people took his candidate going into the presidential race as a joke. But I said that Donald Trump, with enough people voting, would be elected the president. Now, this is documented. You can go back and it's on Mixcloud. But I also said, a little bit later on, after we found out the true nature of Donald Trump, I said that he's never going to leave power. He'll never just go peacefully into the good night. And here it is, some 5 years later, something that I spoke about 5 years ago. Folks said, no, music, you're wrong on this one. Donald Trump is good for the country. And I also said in that particular broadcast on my show that night that those folks that he had around him, this was the makings of a coup. This was the makings of white men trying to hold on to power. And they're not going to want to relinquish it come 2021 when it's time to elect a new president. No one should really take seriously that Donald Trump is the best person for the United States presidency. But they voted him in. Okay. 4 years of him trying to undermine the very same people that he says that he's helping. Make America great again. Well, the question always looms when you hear that slogan is, when was America great? Was it great on January 6th when these so-called patriots stormed one of the hallowed halls of democracy because they didn't like the outcome of an election? And their mouthpieces over at Fox News was cheerleading in the background, in this echo chamber of Donald Trump is so great that the American people have this, the American people do this, black unemployment and all this was at record lows because of Donald Trump. And we would get on panel after panel, stream after stream, saying how good Donald Trump is. Remember that, angry man? Remember how many streams you did talking about the greatness of Donald Trump? Or some of you other folks, I think O'Shea, Duke Jackson, a few of you other ones talking about how great Donald Trump was for the country itself. Not knowing the whole time he is trying to become King Trump. And he put all these would-be players basically in a circle around him to do just that. And think about this, folks. If some of these folks didn't catch cold feet, what we saw on January 6th would have been a whole lot worse. Because Trump had no plans on stopping anything that we saw happening. And it's documented now by PowerPoint. A PowerPoint coup plot that was placed out in front of several white men to take over the country. And you hear stream after stream, newscast after newscast over there on Fox and OAN and all these pro-Trump places, that this was not a coup, this was not a takeover, this was not a blow to democracy. It was just a walk in the park. You heard folks like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and all those other reporters over there on Fox downplaying this scenario, as they call it, even though in real time they knew exactly what was happening. In real time, they're sending texts to the President of the United States saying somebody's going to get killed. You got to stop this. Even his own son sending texts to the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. You got to tell my pops to stop this. Somebody's going to get killed. And for hours, those Capitol policemen were down there combating something that we thought was, what they tried to tell us, was just a spur of the moment sort of thing. No, this was in plans. And it's written here in PowerPoint, all for the whole world to see. But yet, the United States Congress has refused or won't, for some reason, hold Donald Trump responsible, or won't hold him liable for the shit that he has caused here. Won't hold his cronies to foot about what they did on January 6th or what they did leading up to January 6th. In this case, nothing. And in some case, everything. They did everything that they possibly could to overthrow that election. And they did nothing to stop it until it was too late. You know, they always talking about, you hear these talking points on Fox and all these other pro-Trump places, how easy it is to radicalize these Muslims to get them to overthrow the government. How easy was it to radicalize these white men? Because there wasn't a whole lot of young white people out there doing this insurrection. You can go back and look for yourself. We're talking about white folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and up that stormed the Capitol that day. There wasn't a whole lot of young folks out there. There was some sprinkled, of course, but the majority of people, as the report says, was from 30 to 70 years old. Trump had that many people in America fooled. Now, without further ado, let's get to this first report here. This one's called the PowerPoint Coup. A plot, explosive evidence revealed from the House Committee on the January 6th insurrection. I don't know why they keep calling it an insurrection. Let's just call it a treasonous plot, because that's exactly what it is. Again, folks, remember, during January 6th, we were still at war. The troops were not pulled out of Afghanistan and all these other places. We were still at war. Now, if you go back and look at the Constitution as they wrote it, treason is one of those things during wartime that you're supposed to be summarily killed for. Let me use the correct words: summarily executed. Executed for treason against the United States of America during wartime. Go back and look at the dates and see if these insurrectionists should not be held to the accountability of what the Constitution says, because that's what they run behind all the time, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I told you, they use the Constitution for one or two reasons: either to get them out of trouble or put them in trouble. Nothing else. It's just words on the paper until they need it.
New evidence of the coup attempt inside the White House. That's the context for what we're watching on the Hill, moments away from a criminal contempt vote for Trump Chief of Staff during the insurrection, Mark Meadows. The vote comes amidst damaging new evidence from Meadows' own emails and actions, and it reveals something that actually was not well understood before this committee began its probe. Just how far some of the outside agitators got into the White House. A coup backer who was plotting to overturn the 2020 election making inroads with Mr. Meadows in the Trump White House. Now, Meadows was doing several things to try to advance Donald Trump's interest in overthrowing the election. And that included things that sounded really wacky at the time, like baseless conspiracy theories about election fraud, foreign meddling, and this evidence that is now in the hands of the committee.
This PowerPoint dated January 5th, it is beyond insane.
38-page PowerPoint.
This PowerPoint presentation.
A PowerPoint briefing titled Election Fraud, Foreign Interference and Options for 6th Gen.
We've been hearing a lot about the PowerPoint, although some of the reporting's only just come into view, and it's a PowerPoint plot to stage a coup to end democracy in America and install Trump as an authoritarian leader without an election to back it up. It is that serious. So the committee's looking at this. People should understand this, and as one of our guests mentioned earlier in the program, this may be more of the future.
If it's that serious, folks, why is Mark Meadows not in handcuffs? Why is he allowed to just turn his nose up to a subpoena? If either one of you that's listening to me right now, or myself, if we turn down a subpoena from anybody and say that we have to show up in court as contempt of court, and guess what? A bench warrant will be issued for us, and depending on the severity of that said warrant, they coming to get you. Usually early in the morning when you think they ain't coming. So why hasn't these folks that you know that you have evidence, you have written, documented evidence that they tried to overthrow the government, why not? Why haven't these folks been arrested? Why aren't these folks in handcuffs? Why not? That's the questions we need to be asking. Damn all this reporting on it. Why is Trump still talking about he's thinking about making a run for 2024 with all this damning evidence we got against this character?
Some of it starts with Philip Waldron, a U.S. Army veteran who was pushing this plot and met with Meadows, who faces this vote tonight, not once or twice, but on multiple occasions, and saying they spoke at least 8 times. This was while he was pushing the coup PowerPoint, which had a specific, detailed plan from someone who had his own military government experience to deal with what they were going to falsely claim was foreign interference in the election, and then different options to try to hold on to power, to install Donald Trump, even though he lost the election. This plot, again, in PowerPoint form, talks about declaring a national security emergency that did not exist, or illegally seizing paper.
Now, why is that statement so important? If you declare a national emergency, Trump can authorize the National Guard. He can bring out the National Guard. As you saw what they did for the BLM, when BLM was going to the Capitol. Trump can authorize National Guard. He can authorize what they call martial law and implement curfews to where you're not able to go where. Same thing they did back in, in the 40s and with Germany. Same thing. This is exactly what these folks were trying to do. You can sugarcoat it all you want to, but that's what he did. And you had inside folks in the military. So could this retired military person, how did he think he was able to do this? He must have ties with folks inside, active duty military people that's willing to go along with this plot too. It goes deeper. See, this is what the stuff that the news won't talk about, because you can't censor everybody. You can't tell everybody their opinion about something, and this is my opinion. The plot goes deeper. Because if this retired military army cat was able to write back to Trump and say this and this and this and this, he must have to know that he had some help along with this plot. And remember the movie back in the day called Dave, where the president had a stroke and then they replaced him with somebody who looked like him and they taught him to do everything. There you go, that's Trump. They just put Trump as just a figurehead. The real power struggle was around him. Trump was just a mouthpiece. And that's the dangerous part of this. We got to smoke out the rest of these rats, like this guy right here on the screen, Mark Meadows. We focusing on Trump. No, we need to focus on him and guys that's behind the scenes telling you in one face we're doing all we can to keep the country together, and they're behind the scenes they doing all they can to rip the country apart.
Ballots. That would be a crime if you just did it because you wanted to win. And then ultimately why Jan 6 became such a totemic day for so many of these conspiracy theorists and would-be coup plotters to delay the certification of Joe Biden's win and use that to somehow suggest there was a quasi-legal question about his coming presidency. Now, there were no documented problems to support those allegations. There was no widespread fraud.
None.
Nothing that affected the outcome of the votes in any of these states. But this person was...
Let's go back a second before he gets away. Y'all see that guy over there on the left-hand side, Bill Barr? Notice he's not in the news anymore. Notice when the shit was about to hit the fan, he got the hell on, right? I don't want no more parts of this. Y'all taking shit too far. Ask yourself, you think they just start talking about the plot to overthrow the democracy a couple days before the election? You don't think Bill Barr knew something about this as well? A whole lot of these men should be in jail right now. And I'm going to keep asking the question throughout this post. Why aren't they in jail yet? Why not? If this was any other ordinary American citizen, we would all be locked up. Just like those insurrectionists. Which, by the way, some folks are talking about they got heroes locked up. No, those are treasonous American citizens. It's locked up behind bars. But the thing about it is, the sentences that they're getting are so light. What the fuck did you arrest them for anyway?
With Meadows pushing these conspiracy theories. Maybe China took over the entire voting system and you could just get enough Americans to believe that. Or maybe Venezuela's Hugo Chavez had voting machines that were used. It does look ridiculous on the screen at times, but this was also part of the template that reached the White House. Then the idea is Pence would reject electors that went for that went for Biden, and install fake ones who went for Trump. Now, this PowerPoint was going around before the insurrection. We're going to show you what was going on at the time. Some of this, as I mentioned, it looked bizarre, the type of thing you wouldn't even pay attention to, let alone take seriously. And yet this was part of what ultimately got pushed all the way to the 6th by people, some of whom later acting violently, did want to overthrow the U.S. government, which means that's a floor, not a ceiling for people who might do it again. Keep in mind, everything.
Absolute great point. That's a floor, not a ceiling. You don't think that somebody else was set back watching and said, the mistakes that they made, we can't do those mistakes again. You don't think there's some white separatist groups that sat back and watched this insurrection and watched how it unfolded and said, we can't do this again. It's not going to work like this. That's a floor, not a ceiling. The next time we do it, we got to get a little bit better. We got to be a little bit more secretive. We got to have the right people in the right places. We can't have Donald Trump involved because he don't know how to shut his damn mouth. Better watch out for Josh Hawley, whatever his name is. Keep your eye on him, folks. He will surface again. Trust me. Everybody got their eye on Ron DeSantis. No. He don't know how to shut up. Josh Hawley is the guy we need to be watching. He's going to come out, guarantee it. Watch and see what I'm saying. Right after this next swing of elections, watch how much noise Josh Hawley starts making in Congress. You heard it first, right here.
The thing they were talking about back then was false.
Our vote is owned by two Venezuelans who were allies of Chavez.
This election was stolen by mail-in ballots. Those are the ballots.
And this guy right here, as they called him America's mayor, Just goes to show you, folks, anybody can be radicalized if you dangle the right carrot in front of them. Remember the pictures of Rudy Giuliani when the buildings came down, 9/11? Remember the pictures of him, how much Americans loved this guy? He was the symbol of New York. Remember when he was the brash new prosecutor who took on the mob? He just used what he learned prosecuting them and brought it to the table towards the end of his political career. He ain't got nothing else to lose. Shit, I'm old. If I get caught, if I get locked up, a couple of years from now, I'll be dead anyway. But let me grab hold of this last vestige of power. Maybe I can become the Speaker of the House, or maybe I can have a high-level position on the cabinet, or I can be one of the court jesters of King Trump.
That were stuck in the machine 8 times, 9 times, 10 times.
All kinds of massive interests of globalist dictators,
Why ain't this bitch in jail?
You name it. Everybody's against us except President Trump.
This woman was on any channel that would allow her to talk, saying this very same shit. Understand what these folks are saying right here, folks. They know they're lying. They know they are. According to that PowerPoint presentation, they know for a fact, without the shadow of a doubt, that what they are saying now is they are lying. That's why they're being sued for millions of dollars. And now it can be proven. Rudy Giuliani and this monster right here, Sydney, whatever her name is, knew when they were standing up in front of those cameras saying what they were saying, they knew that they were gaslighting the American people. That's why they wouldn't go in court and say it, because they knew they could be held accountable if they said it under oath. But guess what? You can be held accountable for it now too. So why aren't these two in jail also? You got enough to know that they're lying. Why don't you treat them as possible flight risks? They got money.
All of that wacky talk in those weeks after Trump lost and Biden won, it really did sound like a sideshow. One last spasm of a conspiracy theory-laden administration, and not the most serious lawyers, if we're being honest. But it is more than that. And it was not designed to be legally true, provable in court, or factually true, the kind of evidence that the empirical community, or whatever you want to call it, might look at seriously.
Now I want you to look at that headline down there at the bottom. Coup backers visit Trump White House before insurrection. Remember at one broadcast, folks, I was saying, why would you allow a tourist visit when you think that something should be going on a couple of days, well, even less than 24 hours before the peaceful transfer of power? And that was exactly this. They needed to get a complete layout of where and who and what. They need to count how many policemen was going to be there. They need to know exactly what was going on inside that building once they rushed that place. Who was going to be where, what was going to be what, and how was going to be how. They needed a foreplan. So that congressman or congressperson, in this case, that allowed those visits also needs to be held accountable. All this plot and all these things that they're putting together to enact January 6th, all this has been put in motion. And still you hear some folks that will argue down and say that, oh, it was just a spur of the moment sort of thing. Well, no. We got PowerPoint, we got text message, we got all kind of shit to say, no, this was not a spur of the moment thing. This was an actual takeover, or an attempted takeover of the United States government. It is what it is. You can't argue this. But yet, go over some of the spaces. Trump is the man. I'll vote for Trump again. Sure will. Yeah, keep on with that.
Just needed, according to these plotters, to be enough to claim a national emergency, or to create enough doubt and putative reasons for enough people in Congress to try to delay that certification or to use violence, which they ultimately tried to do to delay the certification. So while fact-checking is important, and we do a lot of that in this business, you can easily lose the thread by thinking about this only on those terms, because you're dealing with people who aren't even in their own private meetings thinking about it as facts. China, Venezuela, obviously, if they just sub in and out the countries, some of them at some level know they're making it up. They know they're full of it. They don't care. They just want something that other people might believe or that their side will take as the fig leaf for the attack on democracy itself. Now, Mark Meadows was meeting with this person, and Mark Meadows is now running from providing more information about how high these things got inside the White House. So the committee has this evidence. On Friday, we should note, by the way, if this sounds different, well, the news moves. On Friday, the committee itself, through its leadership, was not willing to confirm whether they even had the PowerPoint. In fact, we put some of these questions to one of the key members of the committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Does your committee also have this PowerPoint itself?
Ari, I can't go into what documents we have.
Is this something that originated in the Trump White House or from somewhere else?
Well, Ari, some of those questions we're still trying to determine.
That's fair. We're asking questions that may be important. They're not always answering them. They're honestly saying that they're doing the fact-finding to get there. But obviously, Mr. Schiff was being careful about something that Mr. Meadows is trying to minimize, and that matters a great deal.
It sure does. Let them talk in public. That way, when we throw this evidence on them, you can't walk it back. Now, Mark Meadows has been out in the public eye enough and saying some things that he can't walk back. And this PowerPoint presentation, along with other text messages and things, folks, he gave to this January 6th committee. Now, because it's damning, because he thought maybe it was going to somehow or another alleviate him from responsibility, when he sees that it's not all of a sudden he don't want to cooperate no more. No, you don't get to tell on yourself and turn around and say, I was just kidding. It don't work that way. Again, if this was anybody else in the United States of America, folks, that did what Mark Meadows is doing right now, the police would be at your house. And this is the whole part that makes me scratch my head about this whole situation. Why aren't these folks in jail? Or at least under house arrest? Why are they still able to get on national TV and say the things that they're saying? Why are they still allowed to go onto Fox News, on all these other pro-Trump channels, and spew these lies for months, when we now have documented evidence that everything that they were saying from January 6th on, from November 3rd on, and possible before the election, was an absolute lie? They knew Trump was going to lose this election before all the votes were counted. So they had to devise a plan of just in case. What if he does lose? Because there is a good chance that he will. What do we do then?
What was going on when people who were writing up plots for the illegal overthrow of elections and democracy were getting this high into the White House, getting these meetings, and meeting with Republicans in Congress, some of whom we still don't know who they are? Now, as for Mr. Waldron, here he was in December of last year at a state Senate hearing in Georgia.
President Chavez designed them for. They're designed to control and manipulate votes, and that's what we found reviewing these things. We have affidavits in Pennsylvania and Arizona that these machine printed ballots were injected into the system.
Have you had an opportunity to examine any of other Dominion machines?
No, but we'd like to.
That
standing up in Congress in Georgia, reciting a bold-faced lie, and then you got Rudy Giuliani in the background egging it on. This man that you just saw knew that he was telling a lie. But that's not the worst part about that. This the gullible motherfuckers that was listening to him that carried this message outside that door. Instead of calling the FBI and saying, hey, look, this ain't right here. Come on. You mean to telling me that you have a guy here, the former mayor of the world, and this former army general, saying that the election was stolen because of some fraudulent ballots from what Cesar Chavez did, and we're going to take this seriously? We're not going to look into this? Where's he getting this information from? How does it make it out of that door to me talking about it? How? How is this man that we just saw on the screen still walking around? How?
Ghoulish off-camera laugh is Mr. Giuliani. The reference there to affidavits is legal jargon for they found people who were willing to say things about fraud. It is a type of testimony, but if the people are lying or making it up, it doesn't get you very far. It is not in any way evidence of the actual election problem. It's just saying, hey, I found someone to say this, we wrote it down, it's called an affidavit. That was about as far as the evidence got. So this matters, and we're showing it to you in depth because people need to understand those folks were on Team Coup. They were publicly saying the things I just showed you. And while Mr. Meadows is now running from this in all sorts of ways, while also hiding from it because he doesn't want to provide testimony and evidence, we're learning that Team Coup kept talking to Meadows repeatedly, got to go to the White House, and got to go meet with those Republicans. They were in regular contact. Now, that tells you a lot about how receptive the Trump people were to them. The evidence also has things that, I want to be clear, might work in Meadows' favor on certain issues. Everything I just walked through with you is going up to January 6th. And as you see, it looks bad for Mr. Meadows. Now, what happened on January 6th is one thing, and his book does a lot of this sort of potentially revisionist history, but it's one thing that might help Mr. Meadows.
I'm glad he said that, because you know what? Every one of those goddamn criminals that Trump hired from the start of his campaign, damn near every one of them has wrote a book. Damn near every one of them is capitalizing off Trump's crimes, off an attempted coup. Damn near every one of them has wrote a tell-all book. How many in the last, since 2015 to 2021, how many tell-all books have been written about Trump? Still, he's walking around like 2024 is the year, damn it. I got this. How many of these white, blue-haired Republicans have profited off the anarchy that Trump brought into the White House by writing tell-all books? We didn't even know who Mary Trump was until when? Now she's a public figure. Just because she's so-called standing up telling the truth. But she's making money off this fucked up gravy train too. Every news cycle she's on CNN, Fox, I won't say she's on Fox, but she makes her rounds, folks. So she's making a comfortable living for herself off of Trump's back. She's just the opposing voice of all these other Trump backers out here. That's it. Other than that, we shouldn't even know who Mary Trump is. Why is her opinion all of a sudden so important to the American people? We shouldn't even know who Mary Trump is. But yet we do. Donald Trump in a skirt. Look at her.
Because committee, in its report about him, mentions that a Trump family member was texting with Meadows and said Meadows was, during the horrors of that day, quote, pushing hard on Trump to condemn this expletive as the violence unfolded.
That's his son. That's Eric. Or Don Jr., excuse me. Don Jr. sent this text. Tell my pops, something got to be done. Mark Meadows answered him back. I'm trying to push hard for it. Meanwhile, there's Capitol policemen getting bruised and murdered and brutalized, while Mark Meadows and Donald Trump sit back comfortably and watch this all unfold. They knew what they were doing, folks. Knew exactly what they were doing. The evidence is too damning to say that they didn't. Too damning to say that they did not know what was going on. Even the ones that are trying to stop this now, they knew what was going on, folks. That was a pep rally that Donald Trump did that morning to get the troops riled up to get on down there. I'm going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue with you. No, you're not.
Now, that's a secondhand statement that the committee got, essentially, from contemporaneous text from what was happening at the time. It's an account of the family. They need, as Congressman Schiff mentioned, all the evidence together to draw conclusions. Because, well, it's also possible that Mr. Meadows told some people he was doing that, trying to get Trump to stop the violence, and not doing it, or doing something else when he was in the room. Now, Meadows also reportedly asked this election denier that I told you about, what do you need? What would help? And that individual, Waldron, provided a kind of a list of things like IP addresses, servers, and other data that they wanted to investigate, using the powers of the world's greatest national security intelligence apparatus. Now, we don't have enough information on where that all went, and Waldron denies, by the way, that he personally sent the PowerPoint to Meadows. But there is also this in the reporting. Waldron, who's on Team Coup, says he briefed several members. We can show you this on screen here. He briefed several members of Congress on the eve of the January 6th insurrection. So as I mentioned before, these investigations, they go places. There's a reason why Mr. Meadows and Mr. Bannon and some of these other individuals are acting so hot under the collar, because there's a lot of pressure, criminal, legal, and otherwise. And that may apply to Republicans in Congress too, who met with these individuals that were pushing Team Coup.
Exactly. So you telling me, Ari, that all this was known? You met with actual seated members of Congress. That's right now in Congress, telling you how much they love this country. But you met with a coup, and you didn't say anything to them. You didn't tell the FBI. You didn't go back and report this. And here's a guy that says, well, I didn't say nothing about this. It wasn't on me. I didn't send him this information. It's not make no difference who sent it. It's the mere fact that they have evidence that you did. Just like you said earlier, they just used the very same thing that you were talking about. They just used the world's greatest investigative service to find out exactly where those PowerPoint presentations originated from. Folks, in this day and age, there's nothing that on a computer that can be erased. There's no phone call that cannot be gone back and looked at. No text that you can erase from your phone that you think is gone forever. Even if you bruise and beat up your phone and throw it in the river, they still can go back and find those texts. Okay?
And why are they afraid to get into details or identify themselves? They, of course, have the vote, and they vote for or against certifying those results, and that was all in public. But beyond their right to vote, if they took actions to try to steal the election or to furtively try to help people who were coming into Congress who thought they would steal the election, well, that's a different matter. And we have a coup backer meeting with Meadows multiple times, and a lot more questions here. A lot of questions. There's also an allegation that Meadows was the one briefing the lawmakers before the riot. Meadows already could face up to a year in jail if tonight's vote leads to an indictment and he is convicted. He also could find another way out of this through cooperation or beating the case.
Up to a year in jail. That's all he could possibly get for that particular thing right there. But again, why is he not held? Why is he not held pending trial without bond? Is he not a danger to the... Is that what Mark Meadows did? Is that not the definition of, excuse me, folks, being a danger to the United States government? Is that not... That's not the prime definition of it. You're meeting with someone that's showing you a plot and a plan to overthrow the government. And as an elected member of Congress, you did nothing. You pretty much gave them the green light. But it takes more than Mark Meadows to get this across to the American people. You gotta have what they call state-sponsored news. And we know that's what Fox News is. We know that's how them boys get in touch with them boys. Now, we heard, if you haven't, go over and just type in Fox News January 6th and listen to what Sean Hannity says, and listen to what so many of the other, Harris Faulkner and all these other folks, listen to what all these other folks say about January 6th insurrection. They try to lay blame on Antifa, Black Lives Matter, any other damn person or group that they could think of. But at the same time, they were on TV saying that it was not Donald Trump's folks. They were also texting the White House. And Mark Meadows, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Brian Kilmeade in particular. How are these newscasters, how do they have that much access to the White House, to the President of the United States, to the Chief of Staff? How do they have that much access to them? That they said, how do they have that much control that they could text them and say, you need to tell the president to do something about this? Don't believe me? Here it go.
Multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy. Laura Ingraham.
What legacy? Where do you, honestly, whether you're a Trump supporter or not, where do you see this president, that particular president, I use that term loosely, where do you see him going down in the annals of history as a president of the United States? Certainly not in the middle, certainly not in the top 10, damn near, if not. The only difference between him and Andrew Jackson is there was no war created in the United States behind it. But he damn sure was trying. So who's worse, Andrew Jackson or Trump? Which one?
Wrote, please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged.
Fox entertainers frantically texted Mark Meadows as the Capitol riot was happening and urged him to get then President Trump to stop it. They were clearly alarmed then about the attack on democracy. Well, Brian Kilmeade, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham of January 6th. Meet Brian Kilmeade, Sean Hannity, and Laura Ingraham since.
We also knew that there's always bad actors that will infiltrate large crowds. I don't care if they're radical left, radical right. I don't know who they are.
I have never seen Trump rally attendees wearing helmets, black helmets, brown helmets, black backpacks.
You think she used the word black and brown enough during that particular segment? Go on and listen to the actual segment itself. She uses black or brown in every fucking reference except for what actually went on that day. Who was she talking about when she kept saying black and brown, black helmets, brown this, black? She was saying black people and brown people are out there raising hell instead of saying exactly who it was, Trump supporters. In MAGA hats, not in helmets. And if they weren't in helmets, they still were Trump supporters. Because remember, there was some out there with bear spray, tasers, handcuffs, quick ties. They even built a hangsman noose out there talking about hang Mike pimps, if they caught him. But these folks that you just heard, those three in particular, the reason why they're so important, because they, other than Tucker Carlson, Those are the mouthpieces. Those are the majority of people that the Fox News nation listen to. And I use the word news lightly. But that's the big three. That's the big three.
They knew they could just easily find out and determine hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are going to show up, and because they did. They were descending onto the town, and there they go. They're there to peacefully protest. And we had the reports that groups like Antifa, other radical groups, I don't know the names of all of them, that they were there to cause trouble. I want to explain in detail, if I can, what today is about and why people are feeling the way they're feeling, if to the extent that I think I can. And this is not something that has happened here in a vacuum.
They're going to do anything, Raymond, to keep that narrative alive of January 6th, because I don't know, if Liz Cheney runs out of space in the GOP's Big Tent.
Why isn't Liz Cheney looking into the 500-plus riots that took place in cities all across the country in 2020?
The FBI will infiltrate groups, whether it's the mob or Al-Qaeda, and they'll try to be one of them and unwind a plot before it takes place.
Right.
Do you think maybe, perhaps, and maybe you don't want to give away your series, you find indications that the FBI was actually pushing for this invasion?
The latest political charade on Capitol Hill, and that is Nancy Pelosi's January 6th commission. And literally, it has one mission and one mission only. Oh, let's see if we can impeach and smear and slander and Donald Trump one more time. And, of course, the GOP one more time on national television.
And
I guess these folks here on Fox News just forget that once you record something, or what something is reported on, you can go back and listen to it again, or you can go back and hear it again. What you just heard, folks, this is how they're reporting the January 6th insurrection. If you didn't think anything was going wrong, what was the need for all those texts telling them to stop? These are the very same people that sending those text messages earlier saying, you got to have them do something. You got to have them tell the people to go home. Laura Ingraham, Brian Kilmeade, and of course, even Tucker Carlson. But all of them knew about what was going on long before they started these talking points. They had to switch up. These folks need to be held accountable too, because they were part of it. They were part of this coup. They should be held liable. They should be held liable for that young lady's death because they were in commission of a crime. And whether you're the person that pulled the trigger, or you were part of the crime, whether you drove the car or you were in the planning stages of the crime, you're just as guilty. In this case, insurrectionist was killed. Some policemen were killed. All of these folks need to be held accountable because they knew about what was going on. Yet on national TV, they refused to report it as such. Black and brown, Antifa, and some other. They knew exactly what you were saying. And still going on today. Why isn't this network, why has not the government shut this network down? Why hasn't cancel culture or the true patriots of the United States government gone and said we need to have this taken down? Why not all the sponsors that sponsor Rupert Murdoch and all of those Fox News people over there, why haven't they pulled out? Why not?
Why is it that every other network, if you took January 6th out of their rundown, they'd have a test pattern? This is all
exactly.
This is all they cover. It's unbelievable.
There was certainly a lot of violence that day, but it was not a terrorist attack. It wasn't 9/11. It wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to America. It wasn't an insurrection. The theatrics were intended to produce an emotional reaction. Logic and facts be damned.
And this is the part that gets me. This is the part that chaps my ass about Laura Ingraham. Here it is. She's calling these guys actors. The Academy Award should go to, but actually the Academy Award for dumbasснess in a news show or supposed news show goes to Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and Brian Kilmeade. For the best lying production in the screenplay Y'all running neck and neck.
It is with that knowledge that we will unveil the Angle Awards for today's best performances. God save us from these third-rate theatrics. Now, the award for best use of an exaggeration in a supporting role, the winner's Aquilino Gonell. For best performance in an action role, the winner is Michael Fanone.
One man perfectly suited to address this situation. CNN chief media correspondent and anchor of reliable sources, Brian Stelter, also the author of
Hoax, which I think documented a little bit of the craziness right after January 6th, when you had Laura Ingraham saying this could have been Antifa, when you had Sean Hannity continuing the big lie. But folks, I've not seen a montage like that before. That is so damning to see the text messages they were sending to Meadows, and then just hours and days and weeks later, the lies they were spreading. This is deeply embarrassing for Fox or the Murdochs, or rather it should be deeply embarrassing. Because after all, they stoked the big lie. They fueled the fire that led folks to storm the Capitol. And then, of course, as soon as the siege began, they were embarrassed and it was out of control and they were texting Meadows trying to get it to stop. But, you know, there's a lot of blame to go around here. It includes Fox as well as Donald Trump Jr. and others.
Well, it's also so pure because you get to see what their real raw reaction was to what was happening that day, to what we were all watching before they had time to think about what their reaction should be and what would fit the narrative, it seems. And then they
And she's absolutely right. Before they had time to think about actually what we're going to say, we saw their initial reactions. This is fucked up. We got to stop this. Somebody texted the president. Even his own son said, hey, Pops, you got to stop this. This is going to ruin your legacy. This is going to kill everything that we worked for. You got to stop this. You got to tell these folks to go home. That little text, that little Instagram post, that's not enough. But the bottom line to this whole thing is, folks, these folks knew about this. And now, night after night, week after week, month after month, here it is, almost a year, and they're still trying to say that this was not an actual insurrection. You hear one guy said if the CNN and all these folks wasn't covering this, they would have just a blank screen. They would have a test pattern. Well, Fox, if y'all wasn't over there talking about your Christmas tree that got burnt up 5 years ago, all y'all would have is a test pattern. Because everything else about you is a fucking lie. Even Tucker Carlson got on TV and said, you know what? You can't take anything we say serious because we're not real news. But for the millions and millions and millions of American people that watch you folks every night, they do take you motherfuckers seriously. So you do share some responsibility in this attempted coup takeover. Because you too could have stopped it. Or made it public a lot sooner than you did. You too, you three, big three at Fox News, could have been on the president, so-called president's ass and exposed the coup for what it was. But no, you know what? Y'all thought y'all were going to have a seat at the table. That's why you ain't said anything.
Adjusted it and decided, okay, this is what we're going to go with. But this is what they really thought in the moment.
Right, you're saying there's a story and then comes the spin. And what we're seeing is the reaction when the actual story, when the event, when the terror began. Then after a few hours, they had time to spin. And they came up with the spin and the narrative. And that has become, ever since, well, the liberals are worse and Antifa probably is responsible. And by the way, what about the riots of the summer of 2020? Those excuses are continuing to this day and to this morning, all across not just Fox, but Newsmax and OAN. And yet, these texts don't lie, right? I mean, these texts don't lie, and we've only read a few of them. This committee has hundreds and hundreds of others.
And we also don't know what's in the National Archives. All that stuff could be released soon, and I just want to note that these texts reveal serious legal questions about what happened that day inside the White House. That's a big deal.
Again, let me point something out on that, folks. He's right. They didn't just send one text. I would guarantee, I would venture to say every text that they could find with all these people that are involved are under scrutiny right now. You think these three only sent one text? Do you think Don Jr. only sent one text? Do you think Mark Meadows only sent one text? These probably are some of the less damning texts that's out there first. Imagine what, if they tell you this, imagine what they haven't told us yet. That's the scary part. How close was the United States of America, instead of being a democratic society, was going to be under a dictatorship. Modern day. But all this technology and all the ways that we can snoop on people. You're going to tell me nobody in the United States government knew about this? Nobody? Well, you can't even fart in your house without somebody knowing if the right shit is on your computer.
They also reveal, and this is the stuff where Fox comes into play, what's happened since, the cover-up, the coordinated, it seems, cover-up of what happened that day by people who know better, and we now knew better because we see these texts. Brian, about the same outfit here. Dr. Mehmet Oz is running for Senate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And our Michael Smerconish bumped into him at a Christmas party. And
Smerconish goes to the best.
The reason why I pulled out this clip of all those folks that were talking about the January 6th insurrection is because this is important. Folks, I tell you what, sometimes you expose things for what it's in plain sight, and you think, I hear black people all the time talking about Dr. Oz, how great he is. Dr. Oz is so great, he's this. Do y'all really do your homework on people? Or you just take them at face value? Dr. Oz is not the greatest thing since sliced bread, folks. Those little health shows that he's on TV talking about, he's not talking about them for black people. He's trying to preserve his own race. He's right in the folds and in the mixes of Donald Trump and the rest of them. You know why? Listen.
Best parties.
What transpired? Explain to us.
This is fascinating because Dr. Oz, of course, in the GOP primary, he is running, trying to prove his Republican credentials. And so he needs Fox News. In fact, he was on Fox and Friends yesterday. But then Mr. McConnell shared this story on the radio saying, I asked him, come on my show, you're going to need to reach out to independents. You're going to need to reach out to moderates. And here's what Oz told him.
And I said to him, look, I'd really like to get you on my program, and I will treat you. You know what is my line?
I'll treat you with dignity and respect.
I will treat you with dignity and respect. And he proceeds to say to me, I can't possibly do that because it would upset everybody at Fox. And I'll come on your show after the primary.
Read that statement again. And he proceeds to say to me, I can't possibly do that because it would upset everybody at Fox. And I'll come on your show after the primary. So that means I don't want to fuck up the base of the folks that could possibly get me elected by coming onto your show or agreeing or disagreeing with you. Because all those people that watch Fox, all Sean Hannity has to say is don't vote for me and I'm done. All Tucker Carlson has to do is put a hit piece out on me and I'm done. All the five they call it, all they got to do is sit around and have a nights at the sound table meeting about me and I'm done. So after the primary, I'll come on over. But in the meantime, I'm not going to shit where I sleep.
This is the best illustration of the Fox primary, the power of these right-wing media machines to influence the primaries. And according to Smerconish, Oz was quite honest about this. But let's also be honest about the situation. The real reason that Oz doesn't want to appear anywhere but Fox is he doesn't want to answer real questions, tough questions about his record, about his flip-flops on various issues of importance to conservatives. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that he's lived in New Jersey, not Pennsylvania, for decades. There's a lot Oz doesn't want to talk about, and so he's really going to stay in a safe space on Fox, try to win the primary that way. By the way, what was he railing about yesterday? Cancel culture. He says that because the Philadelphia Inquirer is printing his full name, they're trying to cancel him because, after all, he's known as Dr. Oz. Meanwhile, that's the big news about Dr. Oz. His show's going off the air. So whether he wins or loses this campaign, he's already lost his television show. That's a dramatic move.
And it shows how seriously he's taking this, though. And this is a really critical seat in Pennsylvania. This is huge. And so it's not something to just, I think, after Trump, people realized to stop laughing off certain candidates like this. And they are taking him more seriously this time.
Right. You do have to take it seriously. But I just think to myself, if you want to understand how GOP politics is being distorted, it's because of the Fox primary power. That Fox, that these candidates know that they basically have to stay in a safe space during the primary.
Also, not just primary power. They have a direct line inside the Oval Office, apparently. Well, based on what we're seeing, they did. That's key. Based on what we're seeing from the January 6th investigation. Brian, You're going to have a lot to talk about the way this week is going on Sunday.
Great. Can you come on?
Yeah. I'll check my calendar.
Well, folks, that's going to wrap this up here. Let me pause this right here. That's going to wrap this up here. My man said it best. I couldn't have closed out no better way than to say they had a direct line into the White House. News reporters, TV personalities, helping shaping the way our government is ran. Where did they get that much power from, folks? There's a whole base of people out there that's giving them this power. But yet we sit here on our streams night after night, day after day, complaining about who got the biggest titties, or who just bought somebody's internet channel, or this or that. This is the real power. Laura Ingraham, Fox News, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson. Think how many people they reach out to every night that shape the way this country thinks the next morning. Because a lot of these people go to your jobs that you have, or you talk to them, and they think like this. But I digress. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so very much for listening. I'll drop back on another one here pretty soon. Again, like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, by sharing it, or dropping a few coins, you're more than welcome to do so. Thank y'all so very much. I'm out here at the Chop Shop, keeping it real. Them January 6 rats caught their own damn trap. Y'all have a good one.